So the red wave did not turn out quite as expected. It was a bit of a disappointment last night, to be sure. The question is, why? Why did this happen? Conservatives clearly have a better message, and the polls all indicated leading up to the election that the message was resonating. So why did Republicans do so poorly? We will attempt to answer that. So let's get after it. So Republicans did not live up to the expectations that we all had. So it feels like they did worse than they actually did. It looks like we will take back the House, and while the Senate is still up in the air, there is still a possibility that we can take the Senate as well. Not quite as definitive as the 54 seats a lot of people were predicting, but we still could potentially get to 51. We'll see. Many of the high-profile Trump-endorsed candidates did not do so well. J.D. Vance won, yeah. He was in a red state, and he was running for a previously held red Senate seat. So it was, while not expected because he was a political newcomer, it's not entirely surprising. Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, lost to a brain-damaged stroke patient. Lee Zeldin lost to Kathy Hochul, who doesn't think crime is a thing. Doug Mastriano lost to another soft on crime attorney general in Josh Shapiro, and there were other Trump endorsed candidates who lost, some who won, and we'll talk about that too. But I want to talk about Arizona and Blake Masters, and in particular Kari Lake. As of right now, those two races are still up in the air, although Kari Lake has tightened that race quite a bit. It was looking really grim last night. It was looking like she was going to get blown out, but things have tightened up. So we'll see how that plays out in the days ahead. But those two, Lake and Masters, were endorsed by Trump. And they were either, prior to election night, either ahead. Kari Lake was ahead by 10, 11, 12 points. And Blake Masters was surging. He was closing the gap on Mark Kelly. That brings up a couple of issues. First, and this is a trap that I fell into, and it happens quite a bit, but we have to remember that we cannot trust these polls. We just can't. Regardless of who they favor, whether they favor your candidate or the candidate you're opposing, we can't trust them. That's either a function of oversampling of one party or another, respondents to the poll not being truthful for whatever reason, or fraud. Now, let's not forget that Katie Hobbs, Kari Lake's opponent for the governor of Arizona, she is in charge of the elections. She's in charge of counting the ballots. Seems like a bit of a conflict of interest to have her running in an election where she is in charge of getting the ballots counted. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But she's in charge of the elections, and we had voting machines not working in Maricopa County. At one point, Katie Hobbs was up by almost as many points as Kari Lake was before the election. Kari Lake was up by, like I said, 10, 11, 12 points, something like that. And I remember seeing at one point Katie Hobbs was up by about 8 points. during that election. Now, like I said, it has tightened, but there is no way that should, no way. I suppose you could make a case that because of early voting and mail-in ballots and all that, and that it's just taken time to count the in-person votes, and that's what's accounting for Lake's surge. Maybe, but I'm not buying that. Katie Hobbs, she pulled a Biden and was basically campaigning from her campaigning. She barely even did that. But she was running the campaign from her basement. She was nowhere to be found. She ran away from reporters. She she is a terrible candidate, and there's no way it should be this close. No way. And that, I mean, obviously I'm biased towards Carrie Lake and want to see her win. But even looking at the race objectively, just by looking at what the candidates did on the campaign trail, there is no way Katie Hobbs should be this close. We should have known. We should have known the winner, and it should have been Carrie Lake last night. So, having said all of that, I do still believe that Carrie Lake is going to win. I wasn't so confident last night, but based on the way that that race has tightened and how close it is, I believe she's within a point and a half, with only 67% of the votes counted as of this recording. So she, I think she's going to win. I think she's going to win. It's going to be closer than it should be, but I think she's going to win. So despite all of that, despite the fact that I think she's going to win, despite the fact that the polls are tightening, do I think there is fraud at play? Yes. I think that because Katie Hobbs should not be in charge of, she should have recused herself. She should have resigned her position. She should not be in charge of getting these votes counted. Whether she's doing anything or not, whether people are doing anything on her behalf or not, it just looks bad. And anyone with common sense would try to avoid the appearance of shenanigans, but the left has no shame. So between that, the issues with the voting machines in Maricopa County, and just the wild swings in the polls with no apparent cause other than, because I don't think you can account for that with people being untruthful in the polls. I just don't see that happening. So I think all of that to me points to some level of election fraud. Was there fraud was there fraud in Pennsylvania? Probably. Philadelphia has a reputation for election day shenanigans. So yeah, I think there was a pretty decent possibility that there is some fraud going on. I think Oz was probably going to lose anyway, because he was just a terrible candidate. Despite Trump's endorsement, which, let's be honest, is there any way Oz would have been a viable candidate on any level without Trump's endorsement? Probably not. And we saw what happened with Oprah's endorsement of Fetterman. Now, I don't know that carried him across the finish line or whatever, but it seemed to have more of an impact for Fetterman than Trump's did for Oz. And there's a possibility that Trump's endorsement had the opposite effect on Oz, or for Oz. And we'll touch on that here in a minute. But Florida seems to have resolved its issues of election integrity and voter fraud and things like that. The measures that DeSantis put in place, I mean, we knew he won, and we knew the results of Florida's elections last night, which is how it has been up until about 5 minutes ago. So Republican governors around the country need to take note of what DeSantis did in Florida and follow that blueprint. And going forward, if they do that, we could get back to some semblance of normalcy when it comes to these elections. The other issue at play is that the Trump endorsement may have hurt more than it helped. Now, he's endorsed hundreds of candidates, and many of them did win. I obviously haven't analyzed all of those races. Like I said, there were hundreds. But the high-profile races, like Arizona with Blake Masters and against Kelly, and Katie Hobbs against Kari Lake, the Michigan governor's race with Tudor Dixon and what's her name, Gretchen Whitmer, the New York governor's race with Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin, Pennsylvania Senate, which we already talked about with Fetterman and Oz, the Georgia Senate race with Walker and Warnock, and the list goes on. But the Trump endorsed candidates in those high profile, very important races are either behind or already lost. Herschel Walker looks like he's going to end up in a runoff with Warnock, but those runoffs historically they don't favor Republicans, and given the fact that the third party candidate who siphoned off votes is a libertarian who has very very leftist views and probably siphoned off more votes from Warnock than Walker, it does not look good if we end up in a runoff. Now, when all these candidates were winning their primaries behind the Trump endorsement, everyone thought Trump had the Midas touch. It does not appear, though, that endorsement translated to the general election, especially in these hotly contested, high-profile races. Now, a lot of Trump supporters, staunch Trump supporters, probably are not liking what I'm saying, and they're not going to like what I'm about to say. And despite what my haters on social media think, I am not all in on Trump. I never have been, especially if there are other choices that we can have. With that in mind, I am hoping that his announcement on November 15th is that he is not running and he is not going to endorse anyone for president in 2024, at least not in the immediate. Trump's policies when he was president had our economy booming. Our enemies feared us. Our allies trusted us. We were energy independent. Biden destroyed all of that in less than a year. And so the results of this election in 2022, on some level, baffles me. But on another level, I kind of get it, because the left's hatred for Trump is so palpable. And despite his obvious success, despite the policies that obviously were good for the country, it's probably better that he doesn't run. It's probably better that he doesn't run. Now, I'm not sure if his ego will allow him to step back, but here's hoping and praying that he has some advisors that he will actually listen to, who will tell him that he should not run, that it would be better for the country if he did not run. Like I said, I'm sure there's some people out there, some supporters of his, who are not going to like that, but that's my take on it. Anyway, we'll get into this more when we get some more results and analyze some more of those Trump endorsements. But that's all I got for right now. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And please like this video and subscribe to the channel and share this video out. And I also want to remind you that if you would like to support the channel, aside from liking and commenting and sharing, we have merch hosted on my wife's store, carrygirlgear.com, and and we're on Patreon. So we would appreciate any support that you could toss our way. And remember, it is crucial that you keep your head on a swivel to keep you, your friends, your family, your loved ones, your community safe. Do that, and we'll see you next time right here on the Liberty Cast.